Welcome everyone to another Water Cooler Wednesday. Today we're going to be talking about demystifying DeFi. So the focus today is going to be on DEXs and LP accounting. So we'll talk a little bit about the rise of DEXs, what they mean to the DeFi ecosystem. We'll touch a little bit on how they function, and we will dive a little bit into understanding liquidity pools, which is a real key functionality of DEXs. The rewards and risks of dealing with liquidity as a liquidity provider, and understanding a little bit, we'll touch a little bit on impermanent loss and how that affects liquidity providers as well. So lots to talk about today. We'll jump right in. If anyone has any questions or comments at any point, just chime in because I know we got some people with good experience on here. So yeah, without further ado, I know I've been deeply involved with DEXs just because when I started at TrustSwap, it was in the summer of DeFi. So the summer of DeFi was when Uniswap was really gaining traction. They did their famous airdrop in September of 2020, which anyone who had been using their platform got about, I think it was 400 Uni tokens, which at the time of distribution were worth about like $1,200. So for basically using this protocol, and as an early adopter of this protocol, you basically got paid, $1,200 to use it. People didn't know that they were going to get that, but if you had been using it, and then people who had been providing liquidity made tons of money on top of that as well. So what Uniswap is and what all DEXs are effectively automated market makers. So they eliminate the need for a book of buys and sells at the traditional exchange. What's that?
Feedback.
I'm feedbacking. So what it allows for is you to place an order without needing someone on the other side of that, whether it's a buy or a sell. What it does is you provide liquidity to the pool. So if it's a ETH USDC pool, you would provide equal parts ETH and USDC. And any trades that go through that pool, you would earn 0.3% of your percentage of that liquidity pool. So let's say you provided 10% of the liquidity to that pool. Every trade that goes through gets a 0.3% trading fee charged onto it, and you would get 10% of that 0.3% trading fee. So because there's this pool of liquidity, you don't need to wait for the people to be buying and selling, and you can just interact with the pool. However, because it's governed by a mathematical equation, there's a numerator and a denominator based on what you're buying and selling. As you remove liquidity on one side of the transaction, you either can pump the price up or drop the price down, depending on how deep that liquidity pool is. So I don't want to get into too much detail, but effectively, a decentralized exchange allows you to trade without providing any KYC, without needing any permission to do so because it's on a permissionless network. And it allows you to do so without needing an order book or anything like that. So this kind of revolutionized DeFi, and it allowed for both a lot of new projects to launch. So that created a lot of scam coins as well. But it lowered the barrier of entry of companies that wanted to launch a token. Now, most of them avoided the US for the obvious reasons with the SEC's oversight and things like that. But it allowed you to effectively spin up a new company, a new project, and near instantly have a liquid market for your token. So many companies, instead of the ICO, the initial coin offering, many companies started to do IDOs, so initial DEX offerings, so that they could go to market really quickly with their token. So I started to touch a little bit up on liquidity pools. And effectively, these are what allow DEXs to work. So you lock up your tokens, whether it's, if I wanted to fund the ETH USDC liquidity pool and I wanted to provide $100,000 worth of liquidity, I would need to provide $100,000 worth of ETH and $100,000 worth of USDC so that we're pegging the two and we're inserting equal amounts. And in return, I would get liquidity pool tokens. Now, I've had some discussions with colleagues on this as to, what does that create a taxable event or not? In my opinion, I see it as creating a taxable event simply because in my view, you're disposing of your ETH and USDC in that instance, and you're receiving a separate asset, which is the liquidity pool tokens. Now, the argument that I've heard is that, okay, well, those liquidity pool tokens are like a deposit slip where you can, retrieve your collateral that you put into this liquidity pool. But in my view, because you're at risk of impermanent loss, which basically, just at a high level, what impermanent loss is because you have assets that can change in value, you could put in liquidity into a liquidity pool, and then the price of ETH could tank, and you could then withdraw ETH. You withdraw your initial deposit into that liquidity pool, and in that instance, I think if the price of ETH dropped, you would get less ETH out than you put in, right? Or maybe it's the flip side. If the price of ETH dropped, you pulled out 100. No, you get more ETH in that instance. But if the price goes up, you might get less ETH when you pull it out. So you're not guaranteeing yourself a X amount of tokens that you put in. So in my view, you're at risk of a loss, and so you kind of have a different asset when you're receiving these LP tokens. And these LP tokens accrue fees for however long you're in the pool, based on the percentage of the pool you own. And so you have a built-in unrealized gain into these LP tokens until you exchange them or loss, depending on impermanent loss and how that affects your investment. But so basically, you can then redeem these LP tokens for ETH and USDC. So kind of got into the weeds a little bit there, but basically, these liquidity pools allow you to have a constant supply of liquidity for these different tokens so that you can interact with them. Now, one of the topics we've talked about in the past is illiquid altcoins, and most altcoins kind of in these days start out on a DEX. And if there's a limited amount of liquidity, if there's a small amount of the total tokens circulating supply in a liquidity pool, there's a lot more volatility, right? Because it costs less dollars in order to move the price up or down, whether you're buying or selling. So that's one key thing to look at. And so if you're a project that holds, let's say you got paid by a new project in their token, let's say it's 1% or 5% of the token supply. If they only have a liquidity pool that's 1% of the token supply, you go to sell your 1% that you were given as a fee, you're going to dump the price to zero, right? Because you're pulling out all the liquidity from that pool. So there's a key consideration here when you're dealing in altcoins, in that you have to be aware of the impact on price. And so when you're looking at if you're looking to value your altcoins as a business, one line in the sand that you can draw is pulling up Uniswap and just putting in how many tokens you want to sell and seeing what you can get back, because Uniswap will instantly give you an estimate of how much you will be able to withdraw from that liquidity pool based on how many ETH you're selling, or name your shitcoin. So that's a key thing to consider here. But they have very simple UIs, user interfaces. It's usually just the asset that you want to sell and the asset that you want to buy. And you can change that around. You can input custom tokens if they're not already supported within the DEX. There has to be a liquidity pool for it, obviously, but you can pull in new tokens as they launch, and you can input them into the DEX and trade in that token as long as there's a liquidity pool. So that's kind of the way I see it. And I'm curious, Jeff, if you've thought about this at all, on your end, whether you consider the depositing of LP token, the depositing of liquidity into a liquidity pool as a taxable event, or if you see that as more of like a non-taxable event where you're just kind of you're kind of earning interest on it effectively, or earning a commission on trading fees.
Yeah, we always recommend it's a disposal of a taxable event. And yeah. I mean, the other side of the argument is like maybe wrap tokens, where we don't recommend a disposal, but it's slightly different but similar. Like you can make arguments for both of them, but we always recommend it's more. I'd say it's the more cautious route to make it a taxable event. and recognize, the gains or losses upon disposal.
Totally, I agree, and I think that you make a really good point with wrap tokens, because ultimately the way I see wrap tokens is that you're effectively just adding additional utility to something. Like if you were to deposit your cash into your bank so that you could then do a wire transfer, right? You're changing the utility of that money to add additional benefits to it to be able to send that, because I can't mail cash to someone, right? So the act of me depositing cash into a bank to then send that digitally, to someone else, to me, that's kind of the way I see wrapping, where you're like, okay, I want to be able to transact Bitcoin on the Ethereum network. I want to be able to go on Uniswap and buy wrapped Bitcoin because I want to have the benefits of Bitcoin, but I don't want to have to go on an exchange and sell my ETH for Bitcoin and then buy Bitcoin that way. I'm okay with just buying wrapped Bitcoin on the ETH network. So it allows for additional utility. So I agree with you. I don't think that there's really a disposal there when you wrap a token. Like if I want to bid on an NFT on OpenSea, you can't just put in ETH. You have to put in wrapped ETH. So you can wrap it up so that it has the additional functionality of being able to interact with a smart contract. And now you can use that to place a bid on something where it's locked in the smart contract. And if the bid is accepted, you win it, you get the NFT, they get your wrapped ETH, right? So totally agree with you on that one. To me, it's kind of cut and dry, just because you don't have a guarantee of what you're getting back. It's not really a loan. You're not giving the LP a loan, because you're not guaranteed a fixed amount of ETH and a fixed amount of USDC back. So some interesting stuff there. There's a lot of, obviously more clarity will provide better guidance from our parts as accounting professionals, because right now we always want to steer towards the conservative end for our clients. And for me, that's treating this as a disposal. So just kind of getting into the rewards and risks. Did you have a question, Brian?
I was thinking, playing devil's advocate, it's almost providing liquidity to a liquidity pool almost sounds like you're a market maker if you're looking at a stock exchange. And if you're a market maker, you can make an election to treat your your stock as inventory.
Yeah.
But when you treat it as inventory, you're not recognizing, the gain or loss until it's the inventory.
Well, but I do kind of treat LP tokens as inventory. Technically, they would be like intangible assets, but you have a cost basis for them. You dispose of them, you recognize the gain or loss on them, but it's different from the assets that you deposited into the liquidity pool. And it is very much like market making. That's effectively what it is, but you're not actively doing something. You're just putting your funds into a pool because it's literally what it's called, is automated market maker. So AMM tools. So yeah, so that's exactly what it is. Is it market making? But I think there is a nuance to it because it's automated, so you're not actively doing something here. But that's a really good point.
I mean, it would have to be, codified that,
right.
If it were allowed to be treated as inventory, but it just sounds similar. That's all I wanted to
No, yeah, you're absolutely right. It's very similar. So just kind of talking through a little bit of the kind of the rewards and risks. We've touched upon them so far, but just to kind of highlight them, I know that largely I've been talking about Uniswap because that's the most well known, but Uniswap has a lot of clones on different chains that make them cheaper to interact with. Or like, for example, if I wanted to do a swap from, like ETH to USDC on the ETH network, that has to go through a smart contract. So it costs more block space because there's more going on. And so it's more expensive than just me sending ETH to someone else. And as a result, in times of high congestion on the ETH network, it could cost you $300 to do a swap on a Uniswap. So, many of these DEXs like Uniswap have been cloned onto different networks like Matic Polygon or Binance Smart Chain or, Avalanche or whatever. And, using one of these layer 2s or EVM compatible blockchains reduces the transaction costs. But because they're different DEXs, a lot of times they have somewhat different fee structures for how the trading, how you get charged as a trader on there, and how the liquidity providers get paid. So one of the things that governs those parameters is on the Uniswap network, as an example, is the Uni token. People get to vote on how on what changes are made to the protocol, and like, for example, how much fees are taken. They recently had a vote on whether they were going to redirect a portion of LP liquidity providers fees to some, I forget what it was for, but it was going to be going to maybe the foundation or something like that. I can't remember exactly what the vote was for, but it got voted down. So it can be beneficial to hold the token of some of these platforms, because then you get a say in how the protocol is managed and what direction the protocol goes in. If you're a liquidity provider, it can make a lot of sense to hold a lot of Uni tokens, because then you can help guide the direction of the Uni ecosystem. But back to my point is that, like, these different DEXs can have different fee structures. So on Uniswap, it's 0.3%. I think it differs based on whether it's a more obscure altcoin or if it's, like I was talking about, the ETH USDC pair. But that's the benefit of providing liquidity, right? If I provide liquidity, the transaction volume that goes through there, I get a piece of that. So if you're in it for a long run, it can be a really great way to generate additional yield on chain, different from staking, right? So some people may choose staking because it's a little bit, it's more secure in a lot of ways. It's obviously a dynamic yield, but right now you could earn 8% on for staking ETH, but you need 32 ETH at least, unless you're doing Rocket Pool. And so there's a high barrier to entry. On a liquidity pool, you could deposit, $10 worth of liquidity if you wanted to. And that really wouldn't make sense on the ETH network, because the fees in order to do so would outweigh the amount of liquidity you're providing. But you could do that on a layer 2 solution where it's a lot cheaper. So I've touched a little bit about impermanent loss already, but basically the fluctuating value of token or coins like ETH or things like that can impact how much you would be able to recover out of the liquidity pool based on what you originally provided. So that's called impermanent loss. You're at risk of that whenever you're providing liquidity, because of the changing, the volatility of the assets in question. So doing too deep of a dive into that is probably for another discussion. But effectively, you're at risk of losing the equivalent value of ETH when you enter a liquidity pool, just based on the changing prices and the volatility of the prices there. So, and then I just wanted to talk, before kind of we open it up a little bit more for more discussion on this stuff, I wanted to talk a little bit about the tax implications of all of this. So Jeff and I were talking earlier about how, we both kind of see this as a taxable event, providing liquidity. And then on the flip side of that, when you remove liquidity, you're now selling your liquidity tokens for
I think you froze. It's the negative of living in Costa Rica. There is one negative. Give him a second.
It freezes everywhere.
There he is.
I'm back. I had a power outage there. So yeah, on the flip side, when you remove liquidity, you're able to then, you're going to have a taxable event. There's fees that you've built into, that have been built there as well. Now, into the LP tokens that you've been holding, any gains that you have on that will be recognized at the time of disposal of those LP tokens. So I'm just going to turn off some of my video because I'm on a junk Wi-Fi connection right now. But yeah, so I think that it's important to understand that you accrue rewards within the liquidity tokens. So you don't have a realizable gain until you actually dispose of those liquidity tokens. So that's an important thing to consider there. But yeah, I'd like to, does anyone have any questions or any comments on this?
are you going to go to another topic? I would like to talk about like, the adoption of this a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's do that.
Because I mean,
Like,
well, I
yeah, go ahead.
think getting mainstream or institutional adoption is a challenge. And right now, Cryptio is going to work with Uniswap. We're talking a lot about that to create like an open source tax solution right on their platform. So that'll invite, I think right now people, they think it's cool and all, but getting all the details and being able to report them accurately, I think scares a lot of people away, alone from just the mainstream adoption and actually using something they're not fully comfortable with. But yeah, we're building an open source tax solution for anyone on the platform. So, I mean, it'll be exciting to see if, it helps with the adoption more in the coming months.
Yeah, that's really cool. I love that. I think that it's very much needed, and it's really cool that you guys are doing that in the open as well. I'd love to kind of chat with you a little bit more about that, Jeff, because I know that some of my clients provide liquidity. Multiple of my clients provide liquidity, and I think that that's they both use Cryptio, so could be good to be able to integrate that and learn about the direction that it's going. And if you need input on that as well, we'll be happy to talk.
Yeah, it's a separate project that we're working on. It was part of like a grant process, so they're actually paying us to build this on their site, but it goes hand in hand with what Cryptio does with like indexing chains and showing accounting gains, losses, taxes, gains, losses. So yeah, let's chat more about that offline.
Cool. Ben, I would love to kind of hear from you a little bit about, are there any aspect, I know you guys obviously do crypto insurance. I'm wondering, do you guys do any insurance related to providing liquidity or anything like that? Or is that beyond the scope of what you guys offer?
No, definitely. Yeah. And first of all, hey, everybody, this is my first Water Cooler Wednesday. So an inaugural session. So nice to see everybody.
Welcome.
Yeah, Taylor, great question. I mean, we do. I guess it from our perspective, it just depends on what they're looking to insure. Like if they're looking to insure like their assets on an exchange or in a smart contract or anything like that, it can get a little bit tricky depending on like how the security arrangements work. But I mean, we definitely insure liability associated with staking and utilizing LPs and things like that. So if let's say the professional services are providing yield or providing liquidity in a certain way, we definitely have insured companies that like that's a professional service, and if they get sued because they fail in that professional service, our insurance kind of picks up. So that would pick up like, let's say there's a problem with the bridge that they were using or a problem with sourcing the liquidity or anything like that. And for whatever reason that caused the loss to their client, that's when our insurance kicks in. But yeah, that's kind of around the professional service of it. And then we also insure the directors and officers against allegations of mismanagement for the business, which would also be impacted by their service for yield and staking and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, I mean it's something that, I mean, we haven't seen too much of it come through just yet.
Right.
To be honest, I'd say the thing that we're having more conversations about it now is more on that staking route, especially on ETH. We're just about to launch a product for staking companies that insures them for cloud outage downtime that triggers a correlated slashing event.
Okay, very cool. Nice.
Yeah, it's been like, so me and Dan Ross have been working on that. It's been about 6 months in the making, and we're just about to unleash it. So it's so that's been pretty cool. And yeah, I mean, you guys probably have seen this maybe a similar thing, but DAOs have also been really interested in trying to find some directors and officers insurance since the SEC sued that one DAO. So that's also been interesting.
Right. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of room for and a lot of need for what you guys offer in the space. And I think that it's important to continue to evolve with that stuff. So it's cool to have you guys in the community. Great. Any questions from the people that this is newer for on this stuff? Like anything that we can help clarify on this stuff?
I just actually had a general question for everyone here. I mean, I've definitely, in the last couple of days, I've had a lot of questions on like the Binance SEC kind of stuff. I think we're all in the business of like, trying to make crypto, feel safer for people to get involved with. If they've got accountants, they know that, all right, if somebody's taking a look at them, they've got things by the book and have at least thought of that. And for us, it's risk management and risk transfer. Do you guys find when any of these kind of market events happen that it correlates to either like new business or like opportunities or anything like that, or like more questions around your current clients about like anything like that? Like, have you guys found any kind of correlation with kind of, market events?
All this
I
stuff
think
is
that
great for Cryptio. We're if you don't know who we are, we do accounting and tax. We're SaaS solutions. So, I mean, FTX, was awful for the industry, great for us because it brought attention to accounting and all this, all the SEC attention too. It just brings more attention to regulatory guidelines and making sure you're doing everything by the books. If it's not going after accounting right now, it probably will at one point. So I think all this focus and just getting things right from accounting to compliance to just everything up and down is with every event, it really escalates it even more.
Yeah, I'd say along the same lines, compliance gets the front, the first look here when we have more stuff like this. I saw, I think it was Trevor Ward had a really good post, a really good analogy for what happened with the SEC and Binance. It was kind of like if you're driving down a road and then all of a sudden, and there's never been a stop sign on that, and then all of a sudden one day there's a stop sign and you stop at it, and then you get a letter in the mail saying, hey, for every time you ran that stop sign, even though it wasn't there, we're fining you retroactively. It's kind of what's happening with finance right now. And it's, so I think that once people understand a little bit more of what's going on with it, it's a little bit of a joke. And I think that's kind of the pathway that the SEC has been taking is regulation by enforcement, which I think people are kind of getting sick of. And hopefully with the XRP case, the Ripple case and all that stuff, we'll get a little bit more clarity and at least have some rules so that we know the rules that we need to play by, so that we're not getting penalized for not following the rules that we haven't been told, what they are. So I think that's a big reason why you're seeing or hoping to see more of a focus on compliance within these organizations and compliance from, a tax accounting perspective, but also as a corporate entity as a whole, you want to make sure that that's all buttoned up. So I think it's, that's going to be the focus. And I think that is the correlation that we start to see in the industry with events like this.
Yeah. Brandon just posted an article about the tax gap that they think is attributed to crypto of 50 billion a year. I was trying to figure out what percentage of the tax gap that is. So the last time the IRS calculated it, it was almost 10 years ago, it was 380 billion. So this would be about 13% of that. And recently, the commissioner that just left, Reddick, said that it was $1 trillion tax gap, which would put us at 5%. But the 50 billion could be a low estimate. And like I said, 381 million is an old number. So you're looking at the U.S. tax gap is basically 5 to 13% due to crypto annually.
Yeah, that's quite large. How are you guys, like, again, just kind of on that trend line? I mean, we've had a lot of inquiries come in from like the UAE. We're now seeing like Latin America. So we do a lot of crypto mining companies. We just had our crypto mining product come out a couple months ago. We've had a number of inquiries for Paraguay come out. Okay. Which is interesting, which means that I think a lot of kind of the US Bitcoin miners are potentially looking at kind of relocating at least some of their hash power down south. Have you guys, I don't know the jurisdictions that most of you guys work in. Have you seen any kind of inquiries come outside of the US or have companies look at what tax implications would look like elsewhere if they rehouse, because of what the SEC is doing?
Yeah, I mean, I have one client that just expatriated from Canada. They were a Canadian company, originally. But they have subsidiaries all over the globe already. They have an El Salvador entity that they use for launching new projects. They have a Liechtenstein entity for like their NFT wing. They have and they just formed a UAE holdco and a UAE opco. So they have the holdco that owns all the IP, and then they have an opsco in UAE as well. But yeah, so I've seen that, and I've seen El Salvador because that's another kind of popular place right now. Very crypto friendly. They pay a lot of their sales taxes and bills and all that in Bitcoin. So it's really nice for a blockchain, or a crypto startup to be able to have easy on ramps and off ramps for crypto. So, but I haven't heard Paraguay. That's an interesting one. I'll have to look into that.
I think they have super cheap energy, and now the government's starting to tax them on the energy use. But they're basically increasing the energy use and taking a piece of it. But I think the energy is so cheap down there that miners are just flocking there.
Yeah. Interesting.
Yeah, I think that, people are definitely getting out of the US if they're crypto focused because of the enforcement actions of the SEC. And so I think that you're going to start to see a bigger push for clear-cut guidance from them. And like, does Gary Gensler have just like uncontested power, or does some of these things fall under the CFTC wing? So I think that there's going to be a battle over that, and I think it's not going to really start to heat up until we get closer to the elections. Or we have a solution to the Ripple case. But that's all slow coming. So
I heard rumors that that's coming soon now, but who knows if what I read was just complete nonsense.
I feel like we've been hearing that for 2 years now.
Yeah.
But I agree. You see more, like, they just unlocked those documents of the discussions that the SEC was having with regards to like decentralization and things like that. So I'm hoping that there's some resolution soon. And I think you're right. I think we will get something in the next few months. But yeah, I feel like we've been hearing that we're going to get an answer on this for 2 years now. But